Hi, I'm Pastor David with Declaration Church, and as somebody who's had the opportunity to be a part of the hiring process a number of different times, I can tell you it's not always obvious what you should be looking for in the ideal candidate for the position that you're trying to fill. You might think you have a great idea of what you're looking for. You might think you have all of the details outlined perfectly. You might have it nailed down. You just think if you can find the person that fits these things, that has these characteristics, then you're going to be golden and you'll find that person and it's going to be great. And so you start talking, you interview people, you bring people in, you look at their resumes, you start going through this process and you think, hey, we've got the right person. And then you bring them on board, you go through the onboarding process, they start working and you realize, nope, wrong candidate because I was actually looking for the wrong things. And it's through that process sometimes that you learn what you're actually supposed to be looking for. You're like, oh, you know what? I don't need to be looking for this or this or that. Maybe previous experience isn't necessarily the most important thing. Maybe, time on a previous job, they have longevity at another position and you want to bring somebody on long term. Maybe that's not actually going to be a good thing to look for, a good characteristic to really use to separate candidates from one another. And God actually has given us some great things to look at as well, because when we start looking for people to fill positions, we start looking for external things most of the time. How skilled are they? How educated are they? Do they have experience in this area? We start looking at, how tall they are, how big they are, how strong they are, depending on the kinds of positions we're trying to fill. And it's that way when we start looking for anybody to be involved in our lives a lot of times. We look for, for guys especially, when they start looking for that ideal person that they're going to be looking for to marry or to get involved in a romantic relationship, the first thing a lot of guys look for is what they look like. And honestly, that's not the most important thing in a long-term romantic relationship. Now, I'm blessed because I'm married to the most beautiful woman in the world, but the reality is that that's not the number one thing we should look for, and it's a lot of times the number one thing that we look for when we first start looking to fill that spot. And it's been that way forever. In fact, there's a place in 1 Samuel that talks about when David is selected as the next king of Israel. And Samuel is sent to go and anoint David as the next king of Israel. And he's sent to a house of Jesse. And Jesse has 7 sons. And he has these 6 of them anyway. He has 6 of them pass before Samuel. And the first one that shows up, the first one Samuel sees, he's like, that's the guy. That's the guy. Look how tall he is, how handsome he is, how strong he looks. That's the guy. Knowing at this point that Saul is currently the king and he's taller than everyone else, had all these great physical characteristics, but now he's been rejected as the king. And in verse 7 of chapter 16 of 1 Samuel, so 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7, it says this: "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him." You see, Samuel's looking at all of these external things, and he says, that's got to be the guy, that's got to be the guy. And God says, no, don't look at the external stuff. That doesn't have anything to do with what I'm choosing and the one that is going to be the king next. He says, don't look at that stuff. I've already rejected that guy. For the Lord sees not as man sees. God doesn't look at us the same way that everyone else does, that we look at each other. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. See, God isn't interested in looking at all those physical characteristics. He's not looking for experience a lot of times. And we see that with Jesus and the disciples. When he selects his disciples, he picks some fishermen to start with. He picks a tax collector to be his disciple. Those are guys we would have immediately rejected if we were having a big candidate search trying to find the perfect disciples. But those are the people that Jesus selected. Why? Because he didn't look at their outward appearance and their previous experience and all of these other things that we tend to look for. Instead, he looked at the heart and he saw that these were the men that were going to be right to be his followers and then take the movement of Christianity and make disciples once he left the earth. God has always looked at the heart. He's always looked at the heart first. And one of the number one things he looks for in us when he's selecting us to serve him in some way and wants to use us and bless us and even maybe exalt us to a high position like David was, as he was lifted and exalted to the kingship, is humility. In James chapter 4, verse 10, we're told to humble ourselves. It says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. Let God, allow yourself to see yourself accurately for who you really are. Your strengths, your weaknesses, everything about you, your character. Allow yourself to have a realistic picture of yourself and place yourself in the proper position and place yourself below others. Exalt others around you. Look to lift others up and help others and serve others. Put yourself in that position as a servant, just like Jesus did, as it says in Philippians chapter 2. Humble yourself before God, and then at the right time, he'll lift you up to the proper place so you can have the influence he always intended for you to have. God's looking at the heart, and we should too. And I hope that challenges and encourages you today. Stop looking at all of the outward appearance and all of those kinds of things that we can easily see, the characteristics that are easy for us to see when we look at other people. Instead, try to see the heart. Look deeper and allow God to show you that person the way he sees them, and then act accordingly. That's my challenge for you. And I hope that as you move forward today, you can begin to look at people a little differently. Look at them the way that God does. And look at yourself the same way. So if this is encouraging to you that God doesn't care about that zit on your nose, if this is encouraging to you today that God's not looking at the outward appearance and all of those other things that we tend to look for, but is looking at your heart, if that's encouraging to you, if that's challenging to you today, give this video a thumbs up, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell so you're notified every time we post new content so that I can continue to walk with you and we can walk together as we grow as disciples in our walk with Jesus. Thank you for letting me be a part of your personal discipleship journey today. As always, I'm Pastor David, and I'm out.